What I have for you today is a interesting case from 2021 from Uganda. And I say interesting, I don't think it's going to have any precedent. I don't think it should, but it raises some interesting points that I'd like to go through with you. So here we have a tea plantation, but not of the taxpayer, but of an independent party. And here is the decision. As you can see, it involves Bondo Tea Estates Limited, which is the applicant versus the Uganda Revenue Authority. It's a three-panel judge court that decides the decision. So let's have a look at the facts itself. So we have in India, we have the BK Birla Group, which is one of the largest conglomerates in India. You can see it on the right hand side, and it has a subsidiary, J Shree Tea and Industries, which is one of the world's largest tea producers and distributors. And then if we look at Uganda, we've got the Kajura Tea Company, which is one of the large tea producers in Uganda, and it has a subsidiary, Bondo Tea Estates, which is the taxpayer in this case, and which sold tea leaves to Kajura Tea Company. And it is the sale between Bondo Tea Estates and Kajura Tea Company which the transfer pricing officer or the tax officer attacked. Now, first of all, it was clear that the taxpayer did not have a TP policy. What is not clear is whether the taxpayer had to have a TP policy. As far as I could see, that was not a requirement, but I may be mistaken in that. What I found also interesting about this case is, and since this is a Uganda to Uganda transaction, one wonders why there was an adjustment, because surely a higher price at Bondo Tea Estates would simply have led to less profit at Kajura Tea Company, but the case does not explain what goes on there. In any case, what it does tell us is that 2015 and 16 Bondo Tea Estates had a tax loss. The Uganda Tax Authority have denied half of that loss, but allowed the other half to be carried forward to 2016-17. And then they made additional adjustments for 2016 and 17, saying the price of the sale of the tea was not at arm's length. So they made an adjustment which led to 174.4 million Ugandan shillings, which comes to around 46,000 euros. And under Uganda tax law, apparently the penalty is 200%, because as you can see, the penalty in euros was 92,000, and then there was 5,500 on interest. The taxpayer, in other words, Bondo Tea Estates, when it sold tea leaves to Kajura, received 320 shillings per kilo. The Uganda Tax Authority claimed that the price should have been between 500 and 700 shillings, and so they assessed they made the adjustment to 510, which is halfway between the 320 that was paid and the 700, which was the upper limit of what the tax authorities found. But the taxpayer claims that actually the adjustment is incorrect, in part, as we will see in a bit, because of the Incoterms between Bondo Tea Estates and Kajura, where Kajura basically paid for the tea leaves on the farm and took care of the transportation. A 10-second commercial. If you want to learn more about international taxation or transfer pricing, or treat yourself to an all-round update, or if you want your team to learn or stay updated, please visit my online courses. Now, if we look at the taxpayer's price setting, it says the applicant's witness, Mr. Avaval Pradeep, its director, so in other words, the Bondo Tea Estates director, testified that it properly declared its sales for the financial year ending 31 March 2017. The tax authorities said that they did not. The applicant sold tea to Kajura Tea Company Limited, which was a related party. We saw that. The price given to Kajura Tea was arrived at an arm's length and is comparable to the prices charged by other non-third parties within the same locality in the same period. So what they basically say is Kajura Tea also bought tea leaves at 320 shilling per kilo from other unrelated tea growers. The judges fill in some further detail, and they say in order to understand whether the applicant's price to Kajura Tea Company was at arm's length, one has to ask how was the price set. The minutes of a tea stakeholders meeting of the 7th of January, now remember we're talking about adjustment to the years 1 April 2016 till 31 March 2017. Okay, so the minutes of a tea stakeholders meeting of 7th of January at the Toro Club, Fort Portal, Exhibit A5, show that it was attended by representatives of all major grain leaf buyers, namely Mpanga Growers Tea Factory, Kajura Tea Company, our parent company here, Mabale Growers Tea Factory, Rusakera Growers Tea Factory, and others. The meeting agreed to reduce the price of green leaf from the current 350 per kilos to 280 per kilos with effect from the 16th of January 2016 due to a fall in prices at the auction market. The meeting also reduced transport costs from 100 shillings to 80 shillings. So the transportation costs seem to have been around 80 shillings max, not much more than that, right? By April 2016, 14 months after the price was fixed by the tea factories, the applicant was selling for 320 shillings per kilogram, an increment of 40 shillings, right? The price of the applicant was above the price set by the different stakeholders, but it was 14 months later. And the judges conclude one cannot say that the applicant's price to the Kajura Tea Company was not at arm's length, okay? Now, what did the tax authorities say? They said the field inspection conducted on 12 September 2018 a field inspection which was to verify the correct price charged by the applicant for the sales of its green leaf to Kajura Tea Company Limited. According to the leaf inspection report, 5 outgrowers, so these are the tea leaf providers, were interviewed. They sold their green leaf tea company to tea companies like Rusakera Growers, we've seen these, McLeod Russell Uganda Limited, which we haven't seen before, but actually the plantation that you see in the background here is from the McLeod Russell Uganda Limited website, so I assume that will be their plantations. And then the Mabale Grower Tea Factory, and charged prices ranging from 500 to 700 shillings per kilogram. So this is where the tax authorities get their comparable from. On the basis of the interview, the respondent concluded that the price for a kilo of green leaf for the period 16-17 ranged from 500 to 700 shillings, and that the applicant, whose sales price to Kajura was 320 per kilo, had underdeclared its sales. Now, based on the facts so far, that seems a reasonable conclusion. But then the taxpayer said that the price at which the green leaves is sold to Kajura Limited at their factory varies between outgrowers due to the distance between the outgrowers' fields and the company's tea factory. Outgrowers in close proximity to Kajura Tea Company Limited factory incurred lower transport costs, and apparently they paid for it themselves, to the factory than those whose fields are at a considerable distance from the factory sold. The applicant contended that the price that the respondent ought to have considered was the field price and not the factory one, as the latter can be distorted by transportation costs. And this is an important point. I mean, first of all, it seems like the Kajura company bought the tea leaves from Bondo Estates at the farm, right? Whereas it bought it from third parties to be delivered at the Kajura estate. And it's something that in intercompany relations, it is always important. One needs to look at the Incoterms to see whether it, for instance, is Ex Works or whether it is GDP or DAP. Because in the first one, it is the buyer that pays for all the transportation and insurance and custom clearance, etc. And in the latter, it is the seller that does so, right? So these things are important, and I think it's right that is raised in this case. Now, if we look at the timing, it is interesting, right? So in 2015, in January, we had the Toro Club meeting, and the price was fixed at 280 per kilo. And then Bondo sells for 320 per kilo 14 months later, as the judge said, right, in April 2016. And then the adjustment from the UTA, Uganda Tax Authority, is to 510 per kilo which is halfway between 320 and 700, and the UTA field study was done in September 2018. Now, I couldn't find the development of tea prices in Uganda for the period in question, but these are the global tea prices, and as you can see, they are from 2010 to 2022 quite volatile, varying from 2 whatever units to about 5 units in extreme cases, but primarily between 2 to 4, but that's still 100% increase, right? So here is where we had the Toro Club meeting. Here is where we had the UTA field study, and the question is whether the tax authorities were asking for the prices at that time in September 2018, or whether they were actually looking at whether they were asking in September 2018 about the prices for the period from April 2016 to March 2017. Either way, it is quite clear that January 2015 was significantly lower than any of the other periods, right? So one could say that time is an important comparability factor, and one would expect that either the tax authorities or the judges would have looked at